Test. Sounds good. I may, I may turn it up a little bit. Whatever. Um, yeah. This. So the only reason I'm going live is because Windows is such garbage that it can't make my mic go across two channels in the camera app. So it's easier to just go live and to have YouTube actually do what I'm asking it to do. So okay, that's why it's live. I don't expect anyone to show up. That's whatever. Okay, but exciting stuff for me. So as everyone knows, I did a shit job on all of the Duncan albums earlier, which is fine. I think Duncan's okay. I think he's surviving with me doing a shit job. And I think my worst offense was how I treated this album. And the first time I talked about it, I was like, well, they had some throwaway tracks on there, and then they had Rebel Rebel from their live recordings, etc. And then I came back and I was more honest and I said, well, to be honest, I've only had this a little while and my stylus is busted on my turntable, so only I got to hear it a few times, right? And that's a bit more honest. And so now I've listened to this a few times kind of on its own, but then I've also gone through and listened to all of their albums, and then I put this in place as I'm going through them. And that's what I did again tonight. And it's really fascinating to me because when I listen to Ricochet and Elevator, I always feel like there's something a little bit missing, you know, and I think I don't know how you would describe it. They were looking to have some success, I'm sure, with those two albums, but there was something a little bit missing that existed on some of the earlier albums, and obviously exists on the stuff that Duncan did on his own. And it's fascinating to me that now, after listening to this several times, uh, this is the missing piece. Isn't that fascinating to say that? Because there is stuff on here that you don't necessarily put on an album that you're trying to make like a top 10 album out of. And that's what makes it so fantastic. And in some ways, um, might have been missing a bit from the other two albums, right? And I think the other thing is, like for me, a lot of my favorite albums are albums that the first time I listen to them, I don't really enjoy them that much. And then they grow on you, and there's something deeper behind it. Or maybe it doesn't have to necessarily be deeper. There's some stuff on here that isn't deep, but is very good. And you just kind of miss it the first few times through. And I don't know. Those are the albums that become those albums that, you know, you love for a long, long time for your entire life. And it's kind of different from the early pop oriented Rollers albums in the sense that the first time we heard them, we knew this is a great band from Rollin', like the stuff that they recorded themselves with Rollin' through Once Upon a Star. Wouldn't You Like It, Dedication, It's a Game, you know? We immediately heard this band that we enjoyed. Maybe with It's a Game, it took a few plays, right? But that's what makes it a great album, aside from some of the string section stuff, right? But thankfully, we have Roller World, and we can listen to that, and it gives us an idea of what the actual band was at the time. But yeah, it's so funny because I went through a little bit of stuff with Ricochet, and I went through stuff with Elevator, and I said they were albums, and it's kind of like I just put them on and I play them all the way through. Um, this album, I don't know what was going on in the mind of all the band members, right? But they put stuff on here that they would not have put on those other 2 albums, and that's what makes it so great, you know? And it's so funny for me, and I'll apologize, but it's so funny for me because, some of my favorite stuff, let's get outside the Basic Rollers. Some of my favorite stuff, Plug In Jesus by Doctor No, you know? Everything Went Black Flag. Those are early Black Flag demos that people didn't even know that they existed, right? Where Keith Morris was like doing so many songs that Black Flag did later, and they were killing it. And and to me, like, I don't really care so much about a lot of the Black Flag stuff. But when I hear Everything Went Black, like, that is what it's all about, right? Um, and sometimes I hold the Rollers to this higher level of, well, you've got to be that band that creates that hit, you know? You have to be that band that creates that uh, excitement that nobody else can do. Um, but it's kind of interesting. It's like this album is more along the lines of those other, recordings I'm talking about, where it's just a band. They're just putting out great songs, and I'm disappointed with myself that it took me like, well, I don't, I haven't listened to it nearly enough, you know, but I'm disappointed in myself that it took so long, so many times to listen to it. Um, but finally it clicks. And I'm trying to think what other albums there may be like that. I think the second Talking Heads album, the first time I played it, I was like, oh well, it sounds like the first album, but maybe not as good. And then, over the years, you're just like, oh my god, this is like an ingenious album. Like that. The second It's funny, no one talks about the second, well, seldom do people talk about the second Talking Heads album. I think it's their best album. I don't think anything can compete with that, but not a lot of people, talk about it. But it's one of those things, very much like what I'm about to discuss, where they were just on a, um artistic arc that was just taking off. There was no stopping it, there was no control over it. Like, when you listen to that album, it's just like they're just going off and they're going to do what they're gonna do, you know? There were some things on that album that stood in the way, like the production stood in the way of it, and then there were egos that were getting in the way, and then individuals were doing whatever individuals do, right? And they've been fighting about that ever since. But anyway, let's get into this album, Vox. So it was only, I'm not even gonna get into the details, but it was only released in a few countries, right? Like I'm gonna assume it's like Germany and Japan. So let's go through the songwriting credits on this, okay? So God Save Rock and Roll is apparently Eric and Duncan. And the first time I heard it, I literally thought nothing of it, right? Now that I've heard it like 4 or 5 times, I think it's fantastic, okay? Working for the People, Duncan, okay? Excellent tune. Soho, out of this world, out of this world, fantastic song. Out of this world. I'm so happy that I finally like it just kind of like engulfed me tonight as I'm playing through all of their records and I'm playing this. Written by Eric. The Hero written by Eric. Also fantastic. Now 85, I actually don't remember so from listening tonight, so, okay, I'm still an idiot. Which takes us back and I wanted to say something about me being an idiot, right? Like some people jumped on the first video I made and then they tried to popularize the second video I made as if I'm trying to popularize myself, right? And like I'm as if I'm somebody, and I'm not, I'm nobody. I'm just a person that loves this band and always believed in this band, right? And so I just think it's ridiculous. I just think it's stupid to be attacking other people. And I may be right and I may be wrong. I don't care, you know. Well, I do care, you know, if the band like if, for example, it says they wrote all these songs and they didn't write it, then I'd be like, well, that would kind of suck, and I'll just have to go back to listening to Black Flag and the Dead Kennedys, right? But I know enough about music that if you see someone's name written down as a songwriter, there are royalties associated with that, right? So if someone's trying to call bullshit on that, I'm like, well, that's money. You're actually arguing with money there because no one is going to put down that somebody wrote a song if they didn't write it because that royalties. I've had this discussion before. Arista wants that money, you know. They don't want the money going to the band. Okay, I'm flipping it over. Honey Don't Leave LA, Duncan. New York, Duncan. Both great. The Jig. So this is a traditional tune that the Rollers were playing live at the time, and I think Eric went on to play this live, as he did play violin or fiddle, right? And I enjoyed it more tonight, more than usual, but it could have been the few pints that I had. Only the Young Die Old by Eric, and then the cover of Rebel Rebel. And the thing about that Rebel Rebel cover that I'll say is that it doesn't sound like it's the same recording as the 77 show that I have. So it may be a different recording. And when I say what I have, I'm talking about the Roller World thing. So it may be different from that. I don't know. So anyway, you can see I'm doing a horrible job of trying to pack away this record without injuring it. So I want to come away with a kind of just general feeling about this album. And my feeling now, after listening to this several times, you have to understand, I've had Ricochet since I was a teen. I've had Elevator since I was a teen, and this, it took a while to actually get a copy of this, right? And I've only had it for a few years, you know, such is life. I've got so many other albums that I'm trying to collect. Like my big thing was getting like the best copies of like some Jeff Beck albums and some Gene Vincent albums, and then some Cliff Gallup, who played with Gene Vincent. Like that was my focus. But I do have this, and I'm so happy to have had it. And I guess the only thing what I wanna really say about it is, you know, that this is that album that has those tracks that originally I may have been dismissive and saying, well, these were not, tracks that they were interested in, and they were putting it on here, and they had to have a last album for Arista. And even if that's the case, that is just a bonanza for us as fans because we get to hear this stuff that, yeah, maybe it's not going to, maybe you're not aiming for a hit with this, but it's one hell of a good song, right? And there's just so many songs on here that are great, and also the sounds that they create, and this is actually really important in pop music, right? It's not just about like the chord progression and the melody, it's about the sounds that you create. They create some excellent sounds on this album as well. So I just want to say I'm very happy to have finally, well, I had a lot of problems with my stylus through the pandemic. I mean, this thing costs like $1,000 each time to replace, right? But I've got it like all fixed up, and I'm so happy to have gotten it into a state where I can listen to some of these albums again. But yeah, Vox is just a great album, and uh, you know, going back to the thought of I when I started making these videos, I never thought of myself as like an expert, on the Bay City Rollers. And I just want to talk about one thing. So I was brought on that radio show, and I was able to like mention like my favorite songs, and we did this guest DJ spot and stuff like that. But you know, I was a guest on that show, and the hosts of the show know so much more about all of the Bay City Rollers recordings than I do. I mean, they've been doing these shows. I don't know how many dozens of shows they've done, but they get these requests, and they have so many recordings, that I've never heard, and I've been learning so much from um, that audience of that show with all the requests that they have and stuff like that, right? So you know, it's for me, it's never been about me kind of like putting my what would you say? I don't even know how to phrase it. It's not about my opinion about what's good and bad, and it's not about me having so much knowledge. I mean, as you just seen, I've only heard this album maybe 5 or 6 times now, right? And it just so happens that that's because I play vinyl, and I got this piece of vinyl like 3 years ago, and then my turntable was like all messed up and whatever. But who cares? We're all fans of the band, and that brings me back to one final point, and that is that I don't think fans should be shooting down and trying to take advantage of other fans. I think it's BS. And I've seen some people say, you know what, I avoid social media, but you know, I am here because there's other Bay City Rollers fans. And I think that's great. But I think also people have to be aware that there are people out there that are going to try and shoot you down if you disagree with them. But really, it's all about doing your research and knowing what you're talking about. I guess that's one part, but then the other part is, well, it's your life, you know. So who cares what they say? And what is the benefit of to them? Like, this is the other thing that I laugh about. It's like the Rollers made nothing. They made next to nothing. And then Eric and Woody had to fight to get the rights back to their songs that they actually wrote, which is where, we all know that's where the real money is. And then there are other people that are totally peripheral to everything that seem to think that they're going to make some cash out of this. It's like the Rollers didn't make any cash. What cash are you actually expecting. There's nothing for you, you know? No one here should be looking to get anything for themselves. I'm certainly fucking not, you know? It's about giving out to the band and saying, "Thank you. We appreciate you." And I think that means something to them, you know? And we've lost so many members already. To have people out there fighting about this stuff, it's absolutely disgusting, you know? Like, it's really disgusting. You know, we're getting older. Like, we're talking about the 1970s, and we're getting older. These people deserve our respect. They don't deserve any of our drama. And if some of them are giving us the drama, we don't need to listen to them, right? I know that that's out there as well. So, long story short, I have things to learn. I'm not, I'm not an expert by any, I started this whole thing just because I love the band, but I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. And all it takes is me finally doing, I wouldn't even say it was a review of this album. I'm just saying that this is a fantastic album. I'm so happy that I've listened to it the number of times that I have. I'm so happy and fortunate to have a copy of it in my collection now, right? And I'm also very fortunate that I listen every Friday night to the dedication show where people ask for songs from this album, and it reminds me I really have to go back and listen to this album. So that's long-winded. 22 minutes. I didn't want it to be 22 minutes. This should have been a 5-minute thing. But that's my 22-minute review. I don't know. It's a big discussion about the Vox album, which I really truly love now, and it's moved its way into um, you know, my regular playlist of all of their albums. I absolutely love it. I think it's great. Regardless of how, all the songs ended up getting on there. So that's it, I guess. And I must apologize for making another one of these videos because I said the last one was going to be it. But there was that one missing link, and Vox is the missing link. And I'm glad that I finally listened to it and kind of did a quick review. And I'm glad that I love it. Um, because it's a great album. Thank you, and I'm going to bed. Good night.